crime scenes, but I've never seen one like this. The brutalness of it.
A murder of excessive cruelty.
What she must have gone through.
You stabbed the girl twice in the neck, and those are the fatal wounds. Why are you poking at her 54 more times?
Was this a sexual homicide? Absolutely.
The victim of an obsessive killer.
I could see where a female of her size could have killed her.
You began to think that there's something wrong with this guy and that he could be her killer. It was just weird. It was just strange.
He was on his toes, but he was the only person that could have committed that crime.
The truth will be revealed.
He who solves the crime is the person that looks, relooks, and looks again. It never ends until you find your killer.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. On Florida's first coast sits the quiet community of Jacksonville Beach, enjoyed by many for its surf, sand, and sunshine.
Jacksonville Beach is kind of a bedroom community for Jacksonville.
We have a huge mix of both young people and your older folks that are retired.
It's not real touristy like other parts of Florida, which is actually fine with the people that live here.
We're a small community here in Jacksonville Beach, so we don't have the really serious crime. I mean, you have your auto burglaries, you have your occasional house burglary, maybe 1 or 2 murders a year, but I mean, we aren't overrun with that stuff.
It's the Thanksgiving holiday, and Jacksonville Beach residents are gathering with their families, but that sense of celebration and security is about to be shattered.
A Jacksonville Beach woman, Corey Parker, was due to go to work at the restaurant that she worked at in Atlantic Beach on Friday, and when she didn't show up that morning, the manager said, well, there's got to be something wrong. So she sent the cook to check on her. When he got there, around 11, she didn't answer. And he walked around the apartment trying to look in the windows. And when he did, he saw a bloody body part.
I got the call from our dispatch that the patrol was working an act of suicide. So I told my wife and my 2 kids I'd be back, hopefully shortly. So I proceeded to Corey Parker's apartment. I've been to a lot of crime scenes, but I've never seen one like this. The brutalness of it, and what she must have gone through. With all of the stab wounds from the navel up to her throat and even the ones on her face. Absolutely. It was a homicide.
Jacksonville Beach Police Department detectives William Carlisle and Eddie Bounds are assigned to the case.
Corey was covered in blood. There was an extreme amount of blood on the bed. The bed sheets were in disarray.
The victim is Corey Parker, a 25-year-old college student, originally from Rochester, New York.
Corey could just light up the room. Her smile was as big as the day. I call her a social butterfly. She was very, open, very outgoing, so it was easy for her to make friends. I always feel like if I had anything that I needed to talk about, it was always with Corey.
Corey Parker left her home to come here to Florida from New York. She was a college student working 2 jobs. By all accounts, her physical appearance, her demeanor, her personality was easy to like.
She was just full of energy and vim and vitality and just a really nice person. And, so it makes you wonder who would be so enraged that they would want to take her life.
To find Corey Parker's killer, Detectives must piece together the last 24 hours of her life, starting with the crime scene.
They counted over 100 stab wounds on Corey's body, some of them in multiple places.
She had defensive marks, wounds on her arms and hands. She had 2 severe wounds to her throat that were the fatal wounds. There were also 54 stab wounds to her chest and abdomen that were post-mortem after she died. You stabbed the girl twice in the neck, and those are the fatal wounds. Why are you poking at her 54 more times after she's dead? It's indicative of overkill.
When you see the type of brutality that's seen in this case, over 100 stab wounds, there's 2 schools of thought on this. Number one, this is extreme rage. Someone knew the victim and just keeps stabbing because they hate them that much. On the flip side, there's research my colleagues and I have carried out to confirm that more than 15 stab wounds involving a female is inherently sexual. There is a disorder called picorism, which is sexual gratification obtained, as disturbing as this sounds, from repeatedly penetrating a human body with some type of stabbing instrument.
She was obviously posed on the bed and her legs were spread. For her to be put in that position and to be laid there and rest like that, there's no other reason than wanting to shock somebody that found her.
There was a pair of panties. They appeared to have been taken off of her, so it did look like she was wearing those when she went to bed. The evidence technician examined those panties, and they were able to locate a Caucasian head hair, which had a root bulb on the end of it.
Finding hair at a crime scene in itself is not significant unless you have that rich source of DNA, which is in the root of the hair. Without that, hairs can be substantively similar, but it cannot be conclusively linked to a single offender.
Investigators go over the rest of the apartment, looking for any evidence that could lead them to Corey's killer.
There were finger marks on the windowsill, and it appeared that someone had put their hand there to lower themselves out of the window after killing Corey. But there was no sign of any ridge detail, fingerprints, so to speak. So you can assume from that the suspect was wearing gloves. They came prepared because they knew that they were trying to avoid being detected.
Corey's body was found at 11 a.m. on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. But to narrow down her time of death, detectives need to determine when she was last seen alive. They start with her friend and neighbor, Ashley.
The last time I saw Corey was the night before Thanksgiving. She was talking about meeting her friends for Thanksgiving and taking over some pies that she was going to bake. So she started baking her pies. We had a beer.
Ashley was able to tell us that around 5 or 6 o'clock that she and Corey were interacting together back and forth in the apartment.
After all of that, she was getting ready to go out that night, and that was the last time I saw her.
We learned that Corey had baked the pies so she could attend an orphan's Thanksgiving for people that did not have family in town. She didn't show up for that party, so her friends thought that maybe she got a better offer and decided not to come. Time of death is very hard to pinpoint. They can do it on TV. They can tell you it's the person died at 11 o'clock, but in reality, you really can't do that. So that party helped us fill that immediate timeline prior to her death.
Detectives put Corey Parker's time of death somewhere between 6 p.m. on Wednesday, when she last spoke to Ashley, and 6 p.m. on Thursday, when she didn't show up for her friend's Thanksgiving dinner. Detectives now canvass the neighborhood to see if anyone noticed anything suspicious during that time.
We asked, do you remember who might have been in the neighborhood seen walking around or suspicious cars, things like that.
Many people are away for Thanksgiving, but there are a few around. Among them, a 17-year-old neighbor.
We spoke to this guy, Robert. He was just another person that lived in the area near Corey. He said nothing out of the ordinary had happened or been seen in that area in our apartment complex. Said that he was working and apparently was sleeping, he thought, and didn't know what she looked like, didn't know where she lived at other than we were seeing the police tape around her apartment. He said that's where I figured she lived at because that was all the police activity.
The canvas seems to be hitting a dead end until police speak to another neighbor.
He said he'd seen somebody in the back, which would be the east portion of Corey's apartment. There's an alleyway that leads to a set of convenience stores. And it was that area that he said he saw a guy looking in her back bedroom window.
When we use the term peeping Tom, we usually refer to somebody who's spying on people or looking in on people, say through their windows or otherwise. But they're engaging in this sort of behavior because it's sexually arousing for them. The majority of people who conduct these hands-off sex offenses don't escalate into hands-on offenders, but it can happen. They can become people who would rape or otherwise engage in a violent sexual assault.
Could the actions of a peeping Tom have escalated into the violent murder of Corey Parker?
We started, really hitting that hard, setting up surveillance teams in case he came back. And it's common for people to come back to a crime scene and relive that moment. So we sat up many nights to find somebody or anybody that would lead us to Corey Parker's killer.
Detectives Carlisle and Bounds have honed in on their first lead in Corey Parker's murder. A peeping Tom, recently spotted in her apartment complex.
We were in surveillance mode at that point, looking for any valuable information, but we really didn't have anything specific to go on.
With the peeping Tom lead going nowhere, detectives shift the focus of their investigation.
Rule of thumb in homicide investigation is to talk to an intimate partner, current or former boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, and look at what were the dynamics of this relationship. What were any strains or stresses on the relationship? Financial, romantic?
Corey had recently started dating David Tippins, just 3 weeks before her murder.
I remember meeting David one time when he came to pick her up. She really liked him and thought that maybe she could have more feelings for him and that she could possibly be falling in love with him.
Police called David down to the station for questioning.
Investigators got the sense that David was pretty shaken by Corey's murder. He was very upset by it.
He really liked her a lot, and they had been together a lot during the previous weeks before she was murdered.
Corey had spent the night at David's place on Monday night before Thanksgiving and then took him to the airport the next morning. He had gone to Pensacola for the Thanksgiving weekend to be with his family.
We obviously wanted to verify that, and he was able to provide us with plane tickets, both going and coming, that indicated that he was out of town and was in fact not here during the time that Corey was murdered.
The detectives know from talking to David that he was unable to reach Corey on Thanksgiving Day. And he left a message and she didn't call back.
We have her answering machine, checked everything in there, so he was, in our opinion, was telling us the truth.
So, I think there was a reasonable suspicion that she was dead by then, on Thanksgiving morning.
Having established that David had no opportunity to murder Corey, he's eliminated as a suspect. Detectives are now pursuing a new theory that Corey was murdered after 6 p.m. on Wednesday and before David's call around 11 a.m. on Thanksgiving Thursday. They now focus their attention on the timeline, specifically Wednesday night, when Corey was going out for the evening.
We're just looking for anyone that is close to Corey or that had contact with Corey on Wednesday night. And one of the people that said, hey, Corey was my friend, and I was with her on Wednesday night, was Tiffany.
Seeming desperate to help the investigation, Corey's friend Tiffany Zienta volunteers to come down to the station.
Tiffany described her relationship with Corey as one of very, very close, really good friends. She said a couple of times that she loved Corey.
Tiffany said they were at the Ritz Bar. The Ritz Bar is a very well-known hangout of young adults, professional adults that work all day and they end up there. It's the place to be if you're somebody. That night, there was Corey, Tiffany, and there was at least 3 or 4 other of her girlfriends.
Tiffany explains that she was with Corey all evening at the Ritz Bar until they left at 1:30 a.m. in their separate cars. But there's more.
One of the things Tiffany tells police about that night was that Corey had gotten into a bit of an altercation with a mutual acquaintance named Gregory at the Ritz Bar that night.
Tiffany made it sound like it was something significant with Gregory, and so we wanted to know what he had to say about that.
Gregory told the police that everything was fine that night. He told them he didn't know Corey that well, and that, nothing out of the ordinary happened.
He bumped into her or something, and she turned around and looked at him, and it was just really nothing, according to him.
When police talked to Corey's other friends that were at the Ritz that night, they validated Gregory's story.
As far as we knew, there was nothing to indicate that Greg had a problem with Corey, but Tiffany made it sound more like it was something significant. So it appeared that she was actually lying about it, and our suspicions were heightened.
According to Corey's friends, Tiffany exaggerated how close she and Corey were, that they were not as close as she described.
I got the sense that she wanted the relationship to be more than Corey sounded like from her friends. Tiffany was one that, not to use the word alpha, but it was a very confronting person.
Corey's friends believe Tiffany may have had a sexual interest in Corey, and that kind of got the attention of police because here you had a crime scene where the victim was posed sexually, but there was no evidence of a rape.
So you look at that and you try to evaluate, okay, whether or not there could have been some one-sided love interest on the part of Tiffany, and that maybe she killed Corey as some sort of a jilted lover, or maybe she was upset that Corey had found this new boyfriend and was dating him and had pushed her out.
Having established a motive, detectives theorized that when Tiffany and Corey left the bar together at 1:30 a.m., albeit in their own cars, Tiffany had the opportunity to follow Corey home and murder her.
Tiffany appeared to have knowledge of the crime scene that she really, in our opinion, should not have had. We learned that she knew details of what happened to Corey. Where did she get that information from? How does she know what happened to Corey if she wasn't there herself? Can she be the killer?
Tiffany's a big person, in stature much bigger than Corey. And I'm thinking it would have taken somebody much bigger to overpower Corey and to have controlled her in that confined area in the bedroom. So when Tiffany came into the picture, I could see where a female of her size could have been the one that killed Corey Parker.
Detectives are closing in on a prime suspect in Corey Parker's murder. Her friend, Tiffany.
Tiffany's interest in Corey seemed to be a little over the top from your normal friendship, so we definitely wanted to look at that. And that's what investigators are focusing on.
They zero in on the end of the evening at 1:30 a.m. on November 26th, when Tiffany says she and Corey left the Ritz bar in their separate cars.
Tiffany, Corey, and another group of friends left the Ritz, going home. Well, Tiffany stated that she was taking a friend home in Ponte Vedra. Corey went to her residence. Tiffany would later tell her friends that she was going to spend the night with Corey. But Tiffany said while en route to Corey's house, she called Corey on his cell phone saying, "It got late, coming from Ponte Vedra, and I changed my mind. I'm not going to make it. I'm just going to go to bed. I'll see you tomorrow."
We pulled Corey's phone records, and there was no record of Tiffany's call on Corey's phone records.
Detectives confront Tiffany with this information.
She said I was very intoxicated, and she said I was speed dialing all of my friends, and she said I thought I talked to Corey, but maybe I was talking to someone else. And then she told me that she went by the apartment. It was late. It was about 4 in the morning, and that the apartment was dark, and she didn't get an answer to the door, so she went on home. We strongly feel that based on the condition of the body when it was found on Friday and the circumstances of her death, we believe that she was most likely killed in the hours following her immediate return to her house on early Thursday morning.
Detectives believe Tiffany had the opportunity to kill Corey and dig deeper into her alibi.
She said she took a friend home to Ponte Vedra, but other than that, nobody saw her come home that night. Nobody confirmed that they heard her come in. So Tiffany didn't have an airtight alibi.
Tiffany's lack of a bona fide alibi puts detectives onto a different theory.
We believe that she had come on to Corey inside the apartment, and Corey put up a struggle. And Tiffany didn't want that to come out, that she was gay or that she had wanted a relation more than Corey did. And so Tiffany killed Corey Parker.
Tiffany had the opportunity and a possible motive, but they need to place her in Corey's apartment at the time of the murder. If they can connect her DNA to the hair found in Corey's underwear, then they can prove she's the killer.
The problem was we couldn't talk to her because she had lawyered up, so we couldn't get samples of her DNA. So we had to secure a search warrant.
When DNA is subpoenaed, it means it's ordered by the court. So there is no alternative. It has to be provided.
This is usually done after other attempts have been made to obtain that DNA, because as soon as you serve them with that subpoena, they know right away now that they are in play as a potential suspect. And you hope that they comply with the order, but they can also jump on a plane.
We went to serve a search warrant, and she had moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She picked up all of her belongings and moved in a real quick, hastily move, which to me drew more attention to her. A lot of, with me, red flags started flying. We had to actually fly to Louisiana and interview her in Baton Rouge.
You've got a court order commanding you to do this, so if you have to hold her down and draw her blood, you're going to do that.
But when the results come back from the lab, Tiffany's DNA isn't a match, and she is eliminated as a suspect.
We really believe that she was a suspect because she knew details of the crime scene. Well, we learned that she was a bartender at a local restaurant, and the firefighters that responded to the scene had been in the restaurant and had been telling her what they observed there because they knew she knew Corey.
Tiffany's behavior is really hard to explain. As murder investigations go, she acted the part of a potentially guilty person just by her behavior.
Could be that, Tiffany wanted attention. Or maybe she actually did want to help solve the case. But there's a very strong theme of fantasy here. And maybe that was just to have a more in-depth relationship than what's actually the case.
Determined to find Corey's killer, detectives expand the scope of their investigation to the restaurant where she worked.
Eric Eli was an employee that was infatuated with Corey. She would make complaints about this guy. There's a back area that they go to smoke at in the restaurant. Well, other employees would say that when Corey was there, Eric Eli, he would jump up on the wall and start doing push-ups.
He would ask her out. Corey, being Corey, would try to let him down gently and be nice to him. But from all accounts, she had no interest in dating him, and he couldn't really take no for an answer.
Corey told Eric that she did not date coworkers, and Eric's response to that was, well, I'll quit my job. That sort of piques your curiosity, so yes, we were interested in Eric at that point.
With Eric Eli now in their crosshairs, detectives bring him down to the station for questioning.
There's a couple things that get the detectives' attention. The most noticeable are these marks, like injuries around his hands, that looked as if someone had scratched or clawed at him. He explained those away, or attempted to. It's just part of his job.
Eric basically denied killing Corey, and then he eerily gave details that were similar to what actually occurred in the crime scene. He made some statements that, yeah, if I would have done it, I didn't do it now, but if I would have done it, I would have cut her throat, I would have raped her.
Eric talked about how he would have stabbed her multiple times. He would have left the body in the condition that it was, and it was actually very disturbing.
I mean, why did he need to volunteer that? A normal person, to me, in a normal state of mind, would not come in and give us that kind of detail. And so, yeah, you begin to think that there's something wrong with this guy and that he could be your killer.
Detectives are zeroing in on Corey Parker's co-worker, Eric Eli, as her killer, and theorize he was motivated by rejection.
Eric, to me, stands out as right away a very viable suspect. I mean, here is someone who has been rejected by the victim. Here is someone who places great erotic value on destructive and violent activities, essentially rape fantasies. We understand that these fantasies typically don't stay fantasies, and that they could be actually taking a step to commit murder.
But detectives need to prove Eric had the opportunity to kill Corey and look into his alibi.
He told us on Thanksgiving Day he made her a Thanksgiving dinner and then called her to invite her over. Of course, she didn't answer the phone, but, just that he would go to that length was just weird. It was just strange. But is he off his rocker, or did he actually do it?
That could have been him throwing them off the trail, creating an alibi for himself.
So you have to go to your physical evidence. You want to find out whether any of his head hairs or pubic hairs are on the sheets or on her body. Is his hair the forcibly removed head hair in the panties?
Eric agrees to give a DNA sample, but when the results come in, they turn the entire investigation on its head.
There was no match on any of it. I mean, there's no physical evidence matched to him, no fingerprints in the apartment, none of his hairs were on her bed, none of his hairs were in her panties, so you can't put him there. And you can't say that he killed her just based on his crazy statements. So I wrote him off as far as suspect goes. I mean, you just don't want to see these things go unsolved, and so you dig and you keep on, because he who solves the crime is the person that looks, relooks, and relooks, and you just keep digging, and it never ends until you find your killer.
Detectives are under enormous pressure to solve Corey's murder and put Jacksonville Beach at ease.
There was a lot of fear in the community. I knew a lot of women that lived alone, and a lot of them got really fearful after this happened.
We were definitely afraid. The whole town was just on pins and needles, just wondering who it could be, why, and if it was going to happen again. It was just crazy.
Corey Parker's case has gone cold, and now the Parker family is offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to an arrest.
Wanted posters went up around the beach with Corey's picture and the reward amount and the number to call.
The reward campaign nets some responses, and as news tips roll in, one in particular catches the detective's attention.
These 4 individuals, they were all workers at a barbecue restaurant in Jacksonville Beach, and they started talking about the case.
One of the tips was from a coworker of Robert Denny. Denny had worked at the local barbecue restaurant, and this particular coworker recalled that around the time of the murder, that Robert Denny was acting a little strange. When the detectives looked up Robert Denny in their database, they discovered that he was one of the neighbors that they talked to right after the murder. He told them he didn't see anything, didn't know anything, and nothing about him at that time raised any red flags. He was a 17-year-old kid living at the beach with his sister.
We were able to find out from the sister that he was bringing pornography into the house. He had some nocturnal habits that she wasn't real pleased with. Robert had been what she called sort of a night creeper. He would stand outside the residence at night smoking a cigarette and would actually try to peep in her windows. And so she kicked him out.
She gave the detectives information about Robert Denny's brother, who, as it so happened, was in prison in Texas for stabbing a woman 86 times. And that was eerily similar to what had happened to Corey.
And you start thinking, well, is Robert trying to outdo his brother?
It makes you wonder, what's the role of nature and nurture here? Could the same factors be at play for Robert as with his brother? That being said, biology isn't destiny.
Detectives go looking for Robert Denny at the address where he was living at the time of Corey's murder, but he's long gone.
We were able to take a look around and see that both from inside and outside that Robert had a full view of Corey's apartment, so he was able to look out his bedroom window and see Corey coming or going. If she had her blinds open, he could see right into her kitchen and living room area. We talked to the manager of the barbecue restaurant and also another coworker, and they told us that they had both been over to his apartment on separate occasions, and he had referenced the girl downstairs, Corey. He had been watching her.
There were a lot of arrows pointing in Robert Denny's direction at that point, but the detectives still didn't have really anything tying him to this crime. There was no direct evidence that Robert Denny had anything to do with this.
With Robert Denny now the prime suspect in Corey Parker's murder, detectives scour his background and learn he's now living in Easton, Maryland.
He had met this 52-year-old woman online in a chat room type situation, and she had told him via email she represented herself to him as a 25-year-old girl. He represented himself to her as a 25-year-old male. She said, well, if you're ever in Easton, drop by. Well, in January, freezing cold, she opens the door one night to a knock on the door, and there he's standing in a pair of jean shorts and a t-shirt. So she lets him in. Well, come to find out, she let him move in. We contacted the Easton police, and so we've come up with this story that the police chief's son up there in Easton was injured as a result of a fight, and that Robert matched the general description of the suspect in that case and asked him for a sample of his DNA.
With their plan in motion, detectives get Robert Denny to come to the station.
So we asked to get a DNA sample from him to compare it to the evidence in that case. And he said, I don't decline, but I'd like to talk to my attorney first. So we gave him a bottle of water, see if he'll drink from that. If he does, we get his saliva, and we get his DNA that way. He looked at the bottle of water, he took it in his hand, but he never drank from it. Then we took him for a break out in the garage to have him smoke the cigarettes, and when he was done smoking the cigarette, we were hoping that he'd drop the cigarette in the ashtray, and we could go get it. But he took the butt and put it behind his ear. He wouldn't put it out in the ashtray. So, who does that? Nobody does that.
Intent on securing a sample of Robert Denny's DNA, detectives take a different tack.
We had generated these forms saying, hey, I, Robert Denny, have been asked for my DNA sample. I decline to give this sample. And and we were going to get him to sign it, date it, and then put it in an envelope and lick it and seal it, and then we'd have his DNA on the envelope. So then we did the forms, asked him to sign that. Well, he looked at it, read it, and then he put down there, "I don't decline, I would just like to speak to my attorney." So we asked him, "Okay, well, how about sealing that in the envelope?"
He told us, "Nice try. I know what you're trying to do. You're not going to get my DNA." So he was on his toes. He was thinking at all times.
He outsmarted us there. And so we knew he was savvy, and I was even more convinced at that point that he was our guy because, he's avoiding every effort to get his DNA sample. But, I was committed to solving this case, and I wasn't leaving Easton, Maryland until I got a sample of his DNA.
After a number of dead ends in their investigation, detectives are closing in on Corey Parker's killer, but they need physical evidence to prove their case.
The last day there, we were doing a surveillance of Robert's business.
He worked at a computer store there in downtown Easton, and we were able to watch him as he would come out about every 40-45 minutes, smoke a cigarette.
We were waiting for the instance where if he'd leave a cigarette, they would extract the DNA from the cigarette. We never did. He would break the filters off and put the filter in his pocket and throw the tobacco down to the ground.
But unbeknownst to us, he had a uncontrollable spitting habit where he would arbitrarily just spit on the ground. And we kind of noted where the spit went in the parking lot. So he then turns around, walks into the computer store, and then we walk up there and we see the spit. And so I took my Q-tips and went up there and swabbed 7 different areas. Let those dry, packaged them up, drove them over to the FBI lab in D.C. 2 weeks later, the FBI DNA analyst called me and said that he had identified Robert Denny's DNA from the spit to the hair in Corey's panties. He was also able to identify Robert Denny's DNA as matching the blood from the inside lip of the kitchen sink, which put him in the apartment. So we were jumping for joy at that point.
He was one in hundreds of billions of people that were eliminated. He was the only person that could have committed that crime.
Detectives proceed with arresting Robert Denny.
I am Detective Sergeant Billy Carlisle from the Jacksonville Beach, Florida Police Department. Are you able?
He said that's...
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. He was hyperventilating, and when we told him he was under arrest, he says, "For what?" And we said, "For a murder in Jacksonville Beach."
I'd like to give you this opportunity to explain to me what happened. What happened?
His face went white, and all the blood ran out of his face. He denied killing Corey.
And I look you in the eyes and I tell you, swear to God, I didn't do this.
Robert, you don't want to be man enough to...
No, I am a man, I'm a hell of a man, and I'm honest, and I tell the truth, and I'm telling you the truth right now that I didn't do this.
And he stuck to that and never gave an admission. But we didn't need it.
Investigators are now able to piece together the final 24 hours of Corey Parker's life.
1 o'clock, she was baking pies with her neighbor, Ashley, most of the afternoon until about 6. At 10 p.m., she meets up with Tiffany at the Ritz bar, and they kind of hang out there until about 1:30 in the morning. Corey drives home. Police believe that Robert Denny was already in her apartment when she got home, that he had snuck in after she left, probably through that kitchen window.
We believe that she was killed in those hours immediately following the time period when she returned home and locked herself inside her apartment. Woman's worst nightmare. You're inside your own apartment, locked inside, feeling safe. You go to crawl in your bed, and then out of the clear blue, someone jumps in bed with you and starts attacking you. It was apparent that she fought the suspect valiantly before she died.
No doubt about it. Each one of those stabs is actually a surrogate sex act. Was there a conventional rape? No. Was this a sexual homicide? Absolutely.
Robert Denny is convicted of first-degree murder on April 28, 2005. He is sentenced to life in prison.
He's a sociopath. He just doesn't care for life, and it doesn't matter to him that she's dead, and I don't think he regrets it to this date other than the fact that he's locked up, can't get out of prison. It's probably the most significant case of my career, 43 years in law enforcement so far and still going. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of time and effort, but the end result for the family and for the citizens of this community is unmeasurable.
I call my daughter every night since then. My daughter's a beautiful young lady that's doing exactly what Corey does. She's going to school, she's holding down jobs, she has her own apartment. It hit me as a father. That could have been my daughter. We got her guy off the street that could have been involved in many more homicides.
My favorite memory of Corey is probably her smile. To keep her memory alive is to talk about her, to talk about her story, to talk about the way that she I won't stop talking about her. I think she, in the small amount of time that she was here and the amount of people that she affected in a positive way, that's really what got me.
A savage murder of a fun-loving woman.
It's something I'd never seen before, except maybe in a movie. It was eerie, a crime of passion, a crime of rage, and very improvised.
A suspect's name written in blood.
He has a criminal history.
Is he lying? And if he is, why is he lying?
He was married, and she was going to say something to his wife. Could there be a possible motive there?
The truth will be revealed.
Time is telling us you were the last person to see her.
Who says that if they're innocent? Would you? No, I wouldn't.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Oldsmar, Florida, a small southern town known as a great place to raise a family.
Oldsmar is a quiet community, about 15,000 residents. Some would describe it as a bedroom community.
Pretty much everybody knows everybody. It's kind of one of those areas where people talk to each other, everybody's friendly. There's not a lot of activity that you would consider to be suspicious.
Typically, in Oldsmar, you would deal with some property-type crimes.
Maybe burglaries, maybe some car thefts, but it's certainly not a hot spot where you expect there to be much violence.
Except, on a pleasant Saturday morning, the quaint stability of Oldsmar is rocked by horror.
911 emergency? Please come. Send the police. What's going on there, sir? Karen's dead. Is that your wife? No, it's my girlfriend. It's what? My girlfriend. I just came over here and I found her. Please hurry. Is this suspicious, sir? I would say so, yeah. I haven't touched anything. I opened the door and she's in the kitchen. There's blood everywhere.
Tim Permenter was at his girlfriend's. He had found her dead in the house, and she was on the ground in a pool of blood.
The victim is 39-year-old Karen Pinnell, an airline customer service representative.
Karen was a very fun-loving person. She was always smiling, always laughing, but she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She loved living in Florida. She loved the beach. She liked to fish. She, kind of had a set of friends that she spent most of her time with. So she was somebody that people enjoyed being around.
Veteran Detective Larry Nelvin and forensic science specialist Anna Cox are tasked with solving Karen's horrific murder. They start by surveying the outside of Karen's home.
There's a bird bath that was knocked over in the yard. There was a phone box that was open. The sliding glass door was open, and there was a safety pin from the sliding door was laying right on the carpet. It makes you think, was there a burglary? As you walk in the residence, you can see into the kitchen area. That is where Karen's body was. There were several sharp force injury wounds to her body and defensive wounds on her hands and arms, indicative of defense wounds, which when somebody is being stabbed or attacked with a knife, the common reaction that anybody's going to do is to defend yourself, to put your hands up, to try to stop it, to block it.
Karen sustained 16 stab wounds to her neck, chest, and heart, leading detectives to question whether her murder was staged to look like a burglary.
This is obviously a personal attack, somebody that was close to Karen. If this was a burglary gone bad, people typically do what they need to do to get away.
Whenever you see excessive violence at a crime scene, in particular stab wounds, 12 or more, if not sexual, is actually very personal. So you have a crime of passion, crime of rage, and very improvised.
This was over and over multiple stab wounds to her. So this was somebody that was extremely upset, not somebody that got caught off guard and was startled. This was somebody that wanted Karen dead, and they made sure that they killed her.
To solve Karen's murder, Detective Nelvin and forensic specialist Cox will have to reconstruct the final 24 hours of Karen's life.
Timeline's extremely crucial. It allows us to put the victim in certain places at certain times. It allows us to put people of interest in certain places at certain times. So it's almost like it builds this diagram for you, and it puts this puzzle together.
Their investigation starts with analyzing the crime scene.
There's blood spatter on the cabinets. There's blood spatter on the door. And then I look closer at the door, and I see these 3 letters that are just beautifully written in blood, R-O-C. They're all capitalized. They are all the same height and width, and they're located several inches off of the floor. And I think the most interesting thing about them is that they are completely uninterrupted. So it is almost as though somebody very deliberately and methodically wrote these letters.
Your first thought is this our murder suspect? Did Karen write rock on the wall so we would find it and know who had done this to her?
If she wrote it, I logically am thinking she had to write it with her fingers. So I began to look at her hands, and I noticed her left fingers did not have blood on the tips. But on her right hand, there's a little bit of blood on the tips of her fingers.
It's something I'd never seen before, except maybe in a movie or TV show. Whether it was really Karen writing that or not, or it was staged, it was eerie either way. Because clearly somebody was either trying to tell us that Rock did it, or trying to blame Rock for something he didn't do.
As investigators search the crime scene, they uncover an important piece of physical evidence.
Also inside of Karen's residence is a pizza box, missing 3 pieces of pizza. There's a receipt which shows it was delivered at around 8:48 to her residence on Friday night. So that's a good indication that Karen was still alive at 8:48 when that pizza was delivered.
With the pizza receipt, detectives have an important anchor on their timeline and theorize that Karen was murdered sometime between 8:48 p.m. Friday and 10:30 the following morning.
So at this point, we know that Karen had pizza delivered to her residence on Friday at 8:48, and we know that Tim Permenter called 911 at 10:30 in the morning on Saturday when he discovered her body inside her residence.
Tim's involvement up to this point makes him the first person detectives want to talk to.
Tim reports this crime. He has to be considered a person of interest, A, because of the relationship. Intimacy is a risk factor for violence, period. So the fact that they're having a relationship makes him a suspect, but then added to that, he's also calling to report the crime. So that could also be viewed then as suspicious as well.
Detectives bring Tim into the sheriff's office for questioning.
He appeared to be upset, visibly emotional, and he was very cooperative and said he would, do whatever he could to help us figure out who had done this to Karen. Tim tells us that he met Karen about 3 months prior. He worked at a local car dealership, and he actually leased her a vehicle. He said there was a connection there, and they became involved in a romantic relationship. He described their relationship as good. They were talking about maybe getting engaged. They were looking at some real estate to maybe find a place to live together.
Detectives start to dig into Tim's timeline.
Tim tells us that he went over to her house on Friday night at 7. He was delivering her this kitty calendar. And while he was there, she, at that point in time, makes a phone call to call her dad for his birthday. He left at 7:30 and went back to his apartment in Clearwater, where he has a roommate named George, and they played some video games. And at that point, George left to go to his girlfriend's up in Pasco County. And Tim told us that George's girlfriend, Vicky, actually told him to invite Tim to come up if he wanted to. Initially, Tim wasn't going to go, but he decided to go a short time later, around 9:30. He called and drove up into Pasco County. Tim then told us that he got up in the morning, left around 8 or 9 in the morning before anybody was up, tried calling Karen on his way back to his apartment. He was calling her cell phone, and he was calling her work. Couldn't get a hold of her. And that wasn't like her to not show up to work.
Karen had some health issues. She occasionally, I guess, would have blackouts. And so he was very concerned about her.
So he decides to drive over to her house. When he gets there, he sees her car in the driveway, which was even more concerning to him, because he knew, obviously, she hadn't gone to work. So at that point, he walks up to the front of the residence, and he states that the front door is slightly ajar. So he pushes the door open, walks inside her residence, and he sees her lying on the floor. He said he started to retch because of what he saw, and he was so upset. He backed out of the residence and called 911.
But the more detectives interrogate Tim, the more questions they have.
He said he didn't go near her body, even though the 911 dispatcher asked him to go check, and he refused to go close to her body.
She was a loved one that he was concerned about, that he went over specifically thinking she might have blacked out or something. You would expect him to go up to check her body.
His behavior raises a red flag for detectives, But nonetheless, Tim continues to cooperate with the investigation.
Tim consents to us taking fingernail swabbings and scrapings. We're taking a buccal swab for DNA. We're taking his clothing, and we're taking photographs of him.
But despite their suspicions, when detectives look into Tim's alibi, everything checks out.
Everything with Tim's friend, George, said happened seemed to confirm the story that Tim had initially told them.
Detectives then ask Tim if there's anyone he knows who would want to hurt Karen.
He tells us about a previous relationship that Karen was involved in with the subject named Rock. And he initially said you spell it like rock. However, then he stated to us, no, it's kind of like a mythical spelling. It's R-O-C. He didn't indicate that he saw Rock on the wall. He just told us about this relationship with Rock, which he described as violent, and that he had been in trouble before for some domestic stuff with her.
There's a reason the word Rock was written on the door. It's because she has a boyfriend named Rock, and that's exactly how you spell it. And I was like, really? Get out. At this point, I'm thinking to myself, Rock is possibly the one that murdered her.
Detectives have zeroed in on a prime suspect in Karen Pinnell's murder, a violent ex-boyfriend named Rock.
Tim described Rock as a drug user. He didn't like the guy. Didn't think there was anything good about him.
Anxious to help detectives find Karen's killer, Tim provides as much information as he can about her ex.
Tim further tells us that Rock was still calling Karen once in a while because he had a roll-top desk that was still at her residence. Tim felt that Rock would come by her once in a while when he would have something of his that was there and not get everything in order to have a reason to call her to come back again. I definitely kind of cued in on that, and now I know that we have to establish a timeline for Rock.
Rock is an obvious suspect. You have somebody who it's alleged and documented that there is a history of domestic violence here. We know that this is an estranged relationship, so it doesn't take much to make the link that perhaps he could have acted in an aggressive manner and killed Karen. Maybe there's some sort of motivation in terms of him wanting to rekindle the relationship, or maybe he wants something that he had given her back. Sometimes there's other sorts of feuds underlying these things as well.
Rock's alleged violent tendencies are an important clue for detectives in locating him.
We were able to find a report from our agency back in 2002 where there was a family trouble at Karen's residence there, where her and Rock had got into a fight, and he had left, and when he came back, she had locked the door and wouldn't let him in, and he was banging on the door. Karen was scared.
The police report helps detectives track Rock down. He's in Northport, Florida, a 90-minute drive from Oldsmar.
We were there to kind of catch him off guard, so we surprised Rock at his residence. He was a little standoffish with us, but we introduce ourselves to him, and we tell him we're investigating the death of Karen Pinnell.
Detectives proceed to question Rock about his relationship with his former girlfriend.
Rock described the relationship he had with Karen as kind of, not a really good one. He was over in the relationship. He had his new girlfriend that he was living with now, that I believe they might have been engaged, so he was happy with his life and where it was.
Detectives then confront Rock about the accusation that he had repeatedly been harassing Karen over furniture she had of his.
He's reaching out to Karen, trying to get this roll-top desk back. His explanation was that it wasn't a big deal, and that he was done at that point.
And then detectives drop a bombshell on Rock.
He was really taken back when we told him that his name had been written in blood on the wall at her house. He was startled and shocked and kind of pissed as to who would try to frame me for the murder of somebody, of an ex-girlfriend. So that was very unnerving for him.
Not satisfied with his claims of innocence, Detectives ask Rock point blank whether he killed Karen.
He does tell us that, he has a criminal history, but he says, I had nothing to do with the murder of Karen. We were also aware of the fact that he did live at her place previously. And again, the fact that it's staged to look like there was a burglary. And Rock would be familiar with the area. He knew where the safety pin was on the sliding glass door. He knew about the bird bath, the phone box. It makes you wonder.
Detectives try to pin Rock down on where he was during the time they believe Karen was murdered.
So, Rock was explaining to us his timeline on Friday about coming home from work around 6, 7 o'clock that night. They were up till about midnight or so, having some drinks at the house, and they both went to bed together, and they both woke up together around 9:30 Saturday morning. We were able to speak with his girlfriend who he lived with, and she had a younger son. She said that he was with them on Friday and was there Saturday as well. So at this point, we know a couple things. We know that Rock is a controlling and dark and violent person, and maybe his girlfriend and her son are afraid of him. So, could there be a possible cover-up?
The question authorities always have to ask whenever a significant other or a partner alibis out the other half is, are they just doing this to protect them? Are they covering for them? Are they complicit in the scheme themselves? You can't just take a person at their word. It needs to be fact-checked.
Despite the fact that Rock's girlfriend was home, the timeline shows he still had the opportunity to murder Karen between 8:48 p.m. and 10:30 a.m. the next morning.
So now I'm immediately thinking, is he lying? And if he is, why is he lying? Is he lying because he was the last person to see her? Because he was the one that murdered her?
Detectives have their sights on Karen Pinnell's ex-boyfriend Rock as her possible killer. But they don't have any physical evidence to connect him to the crime, so they put his alibi to the test.
Initially, when we're having a conversation or interviewing somebody, you're just trying to really get their timeline. And then what you do is you go back to try to see if there's discrepancies in it.
When the police were conducting their investigation, they started to pull some of the information from cell phone towers.
Detectives are hoping Rock's cell phone activity will provide useful information, but what they discover is surprising.
They were able to confirm that Rock was at home with his family, and there was nothing that would indicate any telltale, or any clues that would indicate that he was not there. And his story is corroborated by other people. So he was eliminated as being a suspect.
The fact that in this case, the victim's sort of dying act seems to have been writing her killer's name in blood. This is one of those clues that you never get. And when it shows up in this case, police are obviously going all in on this lead. And the fact that it doesn't seem to be panning out, at some point you need to question, is this a misdirect? Is this name being offered as a red herring? Is he basically being framed?
To find her killer, detectives refocus their investigation by examining Karen's cell phone and text records.
So we see this text message, which is kind of like a loving text message, flirtatious text message from somebody in there is built as like pilot. We're able to identify who that person is. We're able to track him down. He was a little bit hesitant at first to talk because he was married. When you have a subject that she has a casual romantic relationship with, and you learn that he's married, that obviously makes you think, could there be a possible motive there? Was there something going on and she was going to say something to his wife, and he knew that, so he wanted to get rid of that and eliminate that problem.
People will go to all kinds of lengths to keep their illicit trysts and affairs a secret, so that there's no cross-pollination between their two lives. But this inevitably complicates investigations when you realize that what seemed to be straightforward life is actually a spider web with suspects all over the place. And whenever some kind of secret relationship is revealed, they're naturally going to be a strong person of interest, the same as the known intimate partner, the husband, the wife, the boyfriend, the girlfriend would be. In fact, it actually elevates them, given that they are sharing a mutual secret, and with that often comes an additional motive.
Detectives ask the pilot about his relationship with Karen.
He says that, yeah, he dated her from time to time, but it was a casual romantic relationship. And then he tells us that he was flying the day before Karen's murder, and we have a hotel receipt as well from him. So we were able to very quickly eliminate him as being a suspect based on flight records and based on hotel records of where he was, completely out of the country altogether.
Detectives still believe that Karen's personal life is the key to solving her murder. Searching for new leads, they interview her friend and co-worker, Catherine.
So we learned from Catherine that Karen was in the process of trying to get more alimony from her ex-husband, Jeff. That's obviously something we need to look into, because there are times when people, get very upset if you're trying to take something from them, specifically money.
Money, they say, is the root of all evil. And sadly, a jilted ex-spouse, rather than part with their money, would rather actually kill the person who they once married. And to them, in their mind, that's an appropriate trade-off.
Detectives haul Jeff, Karen's ex-husband, down to the station for questioning.
Jeff described their marriage as a good marriage. However, he said there were occasions when she could be not so nice if she had been drinking. And that is probably the reason why their marriage ended.
Detectives asked Jeff about Karen's requests for more alimony.
He said he wasn't harboring any bad feelings towards her at all. He had indicated he had had contact with her, however, at this point was done with whatever was there and with her.
Detectives are not convinced that Jeff is being truthful, taking note of his overly comfortable demeanor with respect to the end of his marriage and his ex-wife's requests for more money.
Karen has moved on, is dating other people. Should he wish to have her back, so to speak, this can be a real problem. The whole idea that maybe Jeff was being asked for more financial support, plus the idea that as these things combine, you have increased provocations that lead you to feel more and more resentment over time, could also increase emotion and lead to potential violence.
Greed and money, plus jealousy, that's a very dangerous concoction.
Detectives questioned Jeff about his whereabouts during the window of time that Karen was killed.
He said he was down actually in Miami, 4.5 hours away on a diving excursion with friends. All of that was able to be corroborated. Hotel receipts were able to be corroborated, receipts from the dive shop and so forth, confirmed that he in fact was out of town. We were able to establish very strong, solid timeline and alibi for him to know that he wasn't the one responsible for her murder.
With Jeff ruled out as a suspect, the investigation into Karen Pennell's murder hits a wall.
When you have a small town like Oldsmar, you do have that dynamic when a violent crime occurs where people really are scared. They are not used to this. They don't understand how this could happen. It's all very confusing. So there is that extra pressure to try to not only solve the crime, but to put the community at ease, which is difficult to do when all you can say to the community is, I can't tell you anything because I don't have anything to tell you.
But detectives finally catch a break when the blood analysis results come in.
I remember there was blood spatter all over the wall, on the cabinets, on the door, and one of the questions being presented to me was, how long would it have taken for the spatter to dry before the letters ROC were written on the door? And my conclusion was that the spatter was already dry upon the time which ROC was written, and the reason I could confirm that is microscopically, there was no disruption to the spatter stains. They weren't wiped away, they weren't smeared, they weren't distorted. Well, then I had to figure out a time frame. So it was several minutes after spatter had been deposited that the word rock was written. and she sustained severe injuries to major organs, like major functioning organs in her body that would have pretty significantly caused her to be incapacitated and unable to sustain life for several minutes. So you have to assume that an individual who's dying is able to write that word in such a perfect nature. None of that makes any sense. None of it.
There's no way, even had she been alive after the initial attack, one, she wouldn't have been in condition to write. Two, she would have had to lay there and wait, probably an hour or two, before she decided to try to write down on the wall.
She didn't write this. Somebody else wrote this. Somebody else intended to manipulate this crime scene and try to send all of us on some crazy whirlwind of an investigation, and it's not going to happen.
Detectives confirm a key piece of forensic evidence in the murder of Karen Pinnell. It wasn't Karen who wrote the name Rock on the wall.
So at that point, it was a good moment for us in our investigation because it narrows our focus down to people that are intimate with Karen that would know about this relationship that we had with Rock.
Detectives catch another break when Karen's autopsy results come in.
We learned that her stomach was empty of any food, which was interesting because we knew there was pizza delivered to her residence, and we know there's 3 pieces missing. Well, she didn't eat them. So who ate them?
In the hope of finding answers, detectives track down the pizza delivery guy.
So we find the delivery driver and talk with him. And he very vividly remembers delivering the pizza to Karen's house. He described her as an attractive female that he delivered the pizza to. He had a bit of an accent, and she commented on his accent. So they were having this casual conversation in the front porch area of her residence, and he remembered a gentleman being there, standing in the background inside. And he said he thinks that he upset him because as they were having this conversation, maybe it was a little bit flirtatious, and he said this subject kept passing back and forth in the background, looking at him. He took it as if he was needed to stop having a conversation with her and leave. That's how he described it to us. So that, to me, is a very big revelation in this investigation.
Detectives need to identify the mystery man who was with Karen on the night she was killed. They're hoping there could be fingerprints on the pizza box and direct forensics to go down this road in their analysis.
I'm looking for some type of indication of even a partial fingerprint.
While detectives wait for the fingerprint analysis, they uncover more details about the nature of Karen's relationship with Tim Permenter, her boyfriend at the time of her death.
During our investigation, we're going through our records. We see a report where a couple weeks prior, she had called 911 and hung up. So the deputy goes to her residence for a 911 hang-up call. And it's determined that Tim had come to her house. She called 911, and he left.
Detectives track down the responding officer, and what they learn next blows the case wide open.
The deputy did a criminal history check on Tim and saw that he was out on probation and he had done 12 years in state prison for attempted murder. So he took it upon himself, because it was a public record, and because she had called 911, he informed Karen of this and about his history and that it was for attempted murder.
It's clear that Tim was quite accomplished at leading a double life. He had convinced Karen to be with him, and yet he had this whole other past that she rightly would have been quite concerned about. I think she would have felt betrayed, and Karen may have confronted him about it, and he was upset about it.
So it was all pointing in this big, huge arrow straight at Tim.
Detectives dig deeper into Tim's background.
So we learned that Tim had been involved in an escort business in the Gainesville area and the Tallahassee area. We learned that back in 1990 he was convicted for attempted first-degree murder and kidnapping, which involved an escort and involved him also trying to take out this competitor.
Detectives have Tim Permenter in their crosshairs and haul him back into the station for questioning.
So as we're talking with Tim, we asked if Karen knew about his prison stay, and he told us that he had disclosed that to her at the beginning of a relationship because he indicated she had to get over that. It took her a little bit of time to get over his past. But he told us Karen was okay with it because they stayed in a relationship and she stayed with him.
We know from the 911 call made about a week prior to her death that she realizes that she's been lied to by Tim this whole time, and the cops who attend on that evening tip her off to the fact that he's a known felon.
Detectives theorize that Tim Permenter is the murderer, but without physical evidence, they can't prove it.
A lot of pressure is put on us by ourselves because we want to bring closure to this. We want to, one, take a murderer off the street. Two, we want to get closure for the family. What's happened to their family member, their loved one, their friend has happened. We can't change that. But it's salt in the wound if you can't bring closure to it.
Here's a case where Tim is a guy who's been living a lie his whole life. He's dabbled in all sorts of crime, criminal versatility being a good marker of psychopathy in most cases. So you know you're not necessarily going to get a confession from him. He's not going to cooperate. It'll be one lie after another. So at that point, you really need to focus on what forensic science can tell you. Because forensic science doesn't lie.
Detectives have zeroed in on Tim Permenter as the prime suspect in Karen Pennell's murder.
We have him go over his timeline again, and he regurgitates what he told us the first time.
Tim sticks to his story that he was with his friend George and George's girlfriend at her place in Pasco County on the night of the murder.
But when we really start pressing him, his demeanor changes. It's kind of just this blank look on his face, this stoic, almost dark, a little less open and closed off and short. So at that point in time, he told us he wanted a lawyer, and we placed him under arrest for the violation of probation because he was up in Pasco County, and we're able to get him held in the jail while we continued pushing forward.
While Tim is locked up, detectives receive the results from the fingerprint analysis on the pizza box, and the findings are explosive.
They were able to positively identify a fingerprint on the pizza box as belonging to Tim Permenter. That was huge at that point. Tim had told us he had left that location at 7:30. We know for a fact that he was there at least up until 8:48 p.m. that night. So there's a big problem with that. Specifically, he didn't mention that he was still there beyond 7:30. He said he was, at that time, playing video games with his roommate and then preparing to drive up to Pasco County, when in fact we know he was still at Karen's.
You can't change that. It is what it is. You can't say that you left at 7:30 and a pizza was delivered after 8:30 and your prints are on the box. The timestamp on that receipt directly contradicts the crux of your story. Forensically, time is telling us you were the last person to see her.
But detectives still need more evidence to verify their case. Tim's cell phone records are the last piece of the puzzle.
Once we received all the cell tower information, it again destroyed his timeline and his alibi. Now we know he was there at about 9:30. When he says he's calling George from his apartment to head up to Pasco, he's calling George from Karen's house because the cell tower it's hitting on is directly north of her location. So, we have him at her house at least up till 9:30. which was probably right after he murdered Karen, and he was trying to figure out what he's going to do and how he's going to handle this.
Detectives present Tim with the mountain of evidence they have against him, hoping it will compel him to confess.
She got pizza delivered shortly after 8:30. We know you were there at probably 8:30, 8:35, up until around 9:30. And that's also the time frame in which she had died. I could have been there that long. Is there any reason that there were people that on your shirt that was her? I don't know how, but that blood is on my shirt. I didn't kill Karen. I wasn't there. But it doesn't matter. So just do me a favor and call my sister so she can come pick up the car. Take me to the county, because that's where I'm going right now anyway. The minute I saw the body, I should have run.
So who says that if they're innocent? Would you? No, I wouldn't. I would fight it the whole entire time. So he's somewhat giving up without admitting to it. But we've already started building our case against him, and we've attacked his timeline. His credibility is shot. We have him there based on the delivery of the pizza, and based on those statements that he makes, we know we have our guy. I promise you that.
Detectives are now able to piece together what happened during the final 24 hours of Karen's life.
Karen left work on Friday around 6, stopped at a grocery store around 6:30, and then went home. We know that Tim was over there at least once. He indicates 7 to 7:30. But we also know that he was back at his apartment at 8 when George left. The pizza was delivered at 8:48 to Karen's house, and we know from the pizza delivery guy that Tim was there because he saw him there and upset him. We also know that Tim was there because his fingerprint was on the pizza box. So that gives a catalyst as to what might have started this argument at their residence that night. And the relationship is not going the way he wants it. She's trying to get out of that relationship. You get this guy that delivers pizza. She starts having this, what he perceived as probably a flirtatious conversation, which pissed him off. And that was obvious from the delivery guy. I could see that. And of course, at that point in time, he's a narcissist. He's controlling. And he's going to decide whether it's done or not. And he realizes she's getting rid of me. I can't have her. He doesn't want anybody else to, and he's pissed. So he goes into this fit of rage and stabbed her 15, 16 times to make sure that she was dead.
Tim then tries to frame Karen's ex-boyfriend Rock by writing his name in blood on the wall.
At 9:30, Tim calls George, and we know that he calls her from Karen's house. We know that around 10:40, he arrives up in Pasco County where George meets him at a gas station, and Tim then follows George to his girlfriend's house.
But why did Tim's friend George lie about Tim's alibi?
Ultimately, we learned that he confessed to George that night. But George was scared. I think he's looking at a guy that's been in prison once for attempted murder and now just told him that he stabbed his girlfriend to death. He's scared of that guy, and he's scared that if he does say something, that he'll come after him, his girlfriend, or the kids.
Tim ticks a number of boxes in terms of criminal psychopath behavior. We see it in his previous exploits. We see it in his relationship. We see it with his attempts to frame Rock. And we see it most notably in that after brutally murdering his girlfriend, he gets the munchies and has to help himself to a pizza that's on the counter. It shows you just how cold and calculated he is.
On October 24th, 2007, Tim Permenter is convicted of the first-degree murder of his girlfriend, Karen Pennell. He is sentenced to life without parole.
By grieving for Karen Pennell in this case, I allow myself to feel bad, and I allow myself to be angry, and I allow myself to be confused because none of it makes any sense. And at the end of the day, you murdered her because she broke up with you. There's never a good reason for murder, but that's one of the worst. I don't get it.
all homicide cases, a good ending, I guess, is putting the person that's responsible in prison for it. But it doesn't change what happened. You can't bring their loved one back. This family lost Karen, their daughter, their little sister, who was a good person that everybody loved her.